The first champions meeting in Musume is just around the corner, and last time I mentioned that my next video would be focusing on how to prepare specifically trainees for the upcoming Taurus Cup. But honestly, I think there's something even more important that everyone should know, and that is how to prepare really good parents for sparks and inheritances. The reason why I say this is that, much like real life actually, horses end up having much more longevity as a breeding horse than as a racing horse. What I mean by this is that in terms of Musume, you could make a good racing trainee for say team trials or the upcoming champions meeting, but sometime soon they will very likely be overshadowed. For example, next week there is going to be the Super Creek support card banner, and just like the Kitasan Black banner, if you are planning on pulling on that banner, you will hopefully end up with a significantly better library of support cards than what you have right now. And if you remember your account before and after the Kitasan Black banner, odds are that you're probably not going to be using any of those previous trainees once you get better support cards. Because on average, the new trainees with the better support cards will likely be better. Or even further down the line, when new career scenarios come out, you'll also naturally be able to have trainees with higher stats because of how those scenarios work. But a good parent for inheritance now though will last, because with 9-star parents you can effectively get 300 points of stats in an entire career from the initial bonus as well as the 2 inheritance events, as well as some even better things if you happen to follow some of the tips in this video. Now, the first part of making a good parent is the thing that I'm sure everyone is already aware of: getting a 3-star stat spark. At the end of every run, you will get a stat spark, and the way it works is that one of the 5 stats is chosen at random, although realistically speaking it feels like 9 times out of 10 it's guts, but then after a stat is chosen, depending on the value of that trainee's stat, a star level is randomly assigned, with higher stats leading to higher chances of a 3-star spark. Below 600 points, you cannot get a 3-star spark. Between 600 and 1100 points, you have a 5% chance for a spark at level 3, assuming that stat is selected of course, and if you have 1100 points or more, you have a 10% chance at a 3-star spark if that stat is selected. So the best way to try and get any 3-star spark would be to get a nice split of 600 points in speed, stamina, and power. You don't really go for guts and wit because those aren't really desirable sparks, and technically speaking now, if you want to try and farm for a specific 3-star spark, then going for 1100 points in that stat would be the best case scenario. But if you are in a position where you don't mind getting any of these sparks, going for the 600 splits in each is better. Because if you do try to aim for 1100 in a stat, depending on your support cards and your account, odds are that you will likely be missing out on reaching the 600 threshold in one of the other stats, giving up the chance for a 3-star possibility there entirely. Now, of the 3 stats, all 3 are useful, but arguably the most useful of these is going to be the stamina spark. A speed spark is nice, but odds are that during a career, speed is probably going to be the stat that you're training the most, so you probably don't need the extra boost. Power is also nice, but whenever you train speed, you'll also be gaining a few points of power each time, so power will also be trained quite a bit naturally throughout training. Whereas stamina can only be increased either via going out of your way to train stamina directly, or by training power, which increases stamina a little bit. So that is likely going to be one of the stats that you would be neglecting throughout your run. In fact, for some really short distance careers where you don't run any medium races, you could get away with never training stamina at all and using 2 parents with 9-star stamina legacies to get you through the entire career run. So that's one thing to look out for when doing a career run: the stats. The next thing you should try to do for your parent run is winning as many G1 races as possible. This serves 2 purposes. The first is that by winning the same G1 races as the parents used for this parent, so the grandparents I guess, or the sublegacies, it increases the compatibility. This compatibility is a hidden number represented by the triangle, circle, or double circle when you select legacies to start a run. I'll touch more on the compatibility in just a second, but just know that higher compatibility is better. The other purpose is that for each G1 race you win, you have a chance to generate a spark for that race at the end of your run. And depending on the race, when these sparks trigger during inheritance, they award stats and skill hints. GameTora has a useful page that lists what stat and skill hint each race spark provides when they are triggered. Another spark that you could get, not necessarily from doing any specific G1 race, is the scenario spark that you get for beating the final race. So right now that would be the URA finale spark, which is really nice because it provides speed and stamina when triggered. Speaking of inheritances though, let's come back to that compatibility. I'm gonna try and avoid as much technical talk as possible, but essentially, all Uma Musume have predefined compatibility values with other Uma Musume. And when you are selecting legacies, the connections between the trainee, the parents you choose, and the grandparents associated with them are all summed up, as well as any shared G1 wins. This total compatibility is then indicated before starting your run with either a triangle, a circle, or a double circle. A triangle is a compatibility value of 50 or less, a single circle shows compatibility anywhere between 50 and 150 points, and a double circle is 150 or more compatibility. Basically though, you want double circles, as that will influence how good the inheritance events are during the classic and senior years. Now, as with all things in Uma Musume, these inheritance events are all dictated by RNG. As an example, using the exact same parents for two different trainees, one of them being Major Orion, the other being Haru Urara. Both of them had a single circle compatibility, but the actual hidden value differed by 80 points according to Game Torah. And you'll see that despite Ryan technically having the higher compatibility, in one of the inheritance events, she actually got less stats in total than Haru Urara, since at the end of the day they are still both having similar categories of compatibility with a single circle. And in fact, if we look at an inheritance with those same parents for somebody else, with Mayona Top Gun, who had a double circle compatibility, she got just as much total stats as Ryan did in one of her inheritance events, despite having even more compatibility, even pushing her into the next category. Now, one thing to note though, is that in all of these examples was that it only ever had the blue stat sparks being triggered in those inheritance events. But of course, that isn't always going to be the case. There will be times where you could also have sparks for the parent's unique skills, or the pink sparks for surface aptitudes, or even the aforementioned G1 sparks, or even regular skill sparks being triggered. Now, technically speaking though, the odds of these other sparks triggering is more likely with higher compatibility. But one thing to really look out for is when you get a gold inheritance. So when all the little lights that fly past you in the cutscene glow gold instead of white. And in this instance, having a gold inspiration combined with a high compatibility gives you the best chances to try and get a bunch of sparks. So in that same Mayona Top Gun run, her second inspiration was a gold one, and you can see that it gives quite a big difference in how much she gets out of it. And then in a completely different run with different parents, I had a gold inspiration event with double circle compatibility and also a 3-star URA finale spark that did trigger during inspiration, giving a total of 192 stats as well as a bunch of different hints, all in one single inheritance event. And this is why you should try to aim for the highest amount of compatibility as possible, which again, you can do by winning more G1 races and also technically speaking by choosing a parent that you know will have high compatibility if you also know who your final trainee will be as well. But again, at the end of the day, it is all RNG, but nudging it ever so slightly into your favor is always good. Now, that's not to say that you should only ever use double circle parents, because if you can only manage a single circle compatibility when selecting parents, it's fine so long as the sparks they provide are still good. Next up, for things that you can do for your parent preparation, is considering changing which support cards you use. Remember, technically speaking, all you need in this parent run is to get your stats above 600 points for the chance at the 3-star spark. Unless, of course, like I said, you're trying to hit a specific stat, in which case you're going for 1100 points in a stat. So it doesn't matter if you reach 600, 800 or 1000, they will all still be the same. And odds are you probably don't need your stats to be that high to clear the URA finale. And so if your stats don't need to be that high to clear, do you really need that Narita Taishin speed support card? Yes, it's really good for getting you lots of stats, but again, after a certain point, those extra stats are irrelevant. So instead, what you can consider doing, again, assuming that you're still able to clear the actual URA finale if you do this, would be you could consider changing your support cards to ones that give skills that you would like to get passed down onto that final trainee. As an example, let's say that at the end of the day, you want to raise a really good Mayona Top Gun frontrunner, but you don't really have any good support cards that you can use on her that give frontrunner skills. You've got Asian Flash, which is cool, but she gives a bunch of late surger skills, which aren't really useful for her. But then you notice that you have the rare version of the Silence Suzuka card, which gives some great skills for frontrunners. But that would then mean that you would have to use a rare version of a card, so Mayona Top Gun stats would suffer if you were to use this card in her run. Well, what you can do is that when training your parent, have them use the Silent Suzuka card instead. Then you grab their skills during the run, and then if you happen to get a spark for these skills at the end of the parent run, during inheritance, Mayuno Top Gun could end up getting the hints for these skills from the Silent Suzuka card without having to equip it on herself for her own run. Now, I know what I just said requires a huge chain of good luck. First, you have to get the skill to actually trigger on the parent. Then, not only do you have to get a good stat spark to make it usable, you also need the skill spark as well. Then, when you use this parent as inheritance, you have to hope that the spark for that actually triggers during the inheritance cutscene. But the thought process is that if you're going to be farming for 3-star stat sparks anyway, why not add this in as another little bonus on top? Don't get me wrong, if you manage to get 3-star stat sparks but not the skill spark, it's still 100% usable. And then lastly, when preparing a parent, one other thing to look out for is the parents of the parent, so the grandparents. Ideally, you don't just want a 3-star parent, you want 9-star parents as well. So of course, you want the legacies for your parent run to also have 3-star sparks. And if you don't have many yet, one way to help you get closer to that 9-star spark is to use guest legacies. And there are plenty of places for you to try and find good parents, such as Discord, Hunts.mo, Umapure, or you could use my 9-star stamina Symbol Rudolph, just saying. But something to be careful of when selecting sub-legacies is to take note of the pink sparks. So the spark that increases aptitude for either terrain, distance, or running style. Now, it's not an absolute train smash if you don't adhere to this, but the way the pink sparks work is that a spark will be generated for any of the things that you have an A rank or S rank proficiency in. And so, if you want to try and have your parents get a specific pink spark, let's say, for example, I want to make an air groove parent with specifically a pink spark for medium distance races, well, then you should try to select sub-legacies that do not increase her aptitudes in other categories, as this would then reduce the chances of you getting that medium spark. But again, I would like to reiterate that this is all super micromanagement when it comes to trying to min-max the best possible outcomes of your spark farming runs to try and make good parents. At the end of the day, it does all boil down to RNG. And even if after doing all of this, you end up with a single 3-star stat spark with none of the other things that I have mentioned, you should still consider yourself a winner, since despite all else, at least you know that the stat spark will always be something that you can rely on in all of your runs going forward. But hopefully though, you've learned something new in this video. If you did, liking and subscribing would be greatly appreciated. And also, I'm curious, how many runs have you done so far and how many 3-star sparks have you gotten out of all of those runs? Let me know down in the comments below. And also, I said it last time, but now this time for sure, the next guide video will definitely be going over what to be looking for when preparing your actual runners for the upcoming champions meeting. So look forward to that, and until next time, good luck in your spark farming, and bye bye!